The recent drive to secure US-based critical mineral sources has driven at least one explorer to push forward with a domestic project. Electric Metals, whom is focused on advancing a project in Emily, Minnesota, this past week announced the results of a PEA on a metal that few people talk about, but is critical for the EV industry, energy storage, and steelmaking, amongst other uses. That metal is manganese, which surprisingly has no domestic sources of production. Electric Metals is looking to advance their North Star Manganese project, which they claim has the highest grade manganese deposit in all of North America. Although that bar may not be hard to set if there's no domestic production in all of the United States. Let's dive in. Electric Metals evidently has established the goal of being the first U.S. domestic producer of manganese. Specifically, they want to produce what is referred to as high-purity manganese sulfate monohydrate, or HPMSM for short. For simplicity's sake, we're just going to call it manganese from here on out. Now, we can't say that they would be the first ever producer of the metal within the US, but after going back in the USGS files all the way to the start of publicly digitized records in 1991, we saw no record of production of manganese ore, which means it's been at least like 34 years at a minimum since the mineral was produced in the United States. The USGS, meanwhile, states that manganese ore with 20% or more manganese has not been produced domestically since 1970. And government stockpiles appear to have run out around 2008, after which the country has been entirely reliant on imports. But that's not to say that manganese ore hasn't been consumed by the US. That ore is primarily consumed for the purpose of steel production, as well as the production of silicomanganese and ferromanganese, plus some non-metallic purposes. Consumption of ore last year alone was estimated at 320,000 metric tons, alongside 300,000 tons of ferromanganese and 230,000 tons of silicomanganese. In other words, this metal is in demand. The market just doesn't really like to talk about it. And again, all of it was imported. Against this backdrop, Electric Metals is looking to advance their flagship project, while also highlighting that the North Star Manganese project supports the executive order on critical minerals, because it would be foolish to not try to win a couple of political points at the same time. Okay, let's get into the details of the preliminary economic assessment that was completed on the project. The PEA outlines an operation with a 25-year project life. The actual life of mine, though, appears to be 23 years here. But for some reason, Electric Metals insisted on including the 2-year construction window into the overall life of the project. That timeframe, however, is presented as a base case, with the possibility for extension upon further drilling of known mineralized zones or by using lower-grade material. Over that base case timeframe, 4.3 million tons of battery-grade manganese is expected to be produced, while annual production is estimated at about 180,000 tons of manganese a year. That capacity is expected after a planned expansion with a nominal capacity after expansion of 200,000 tons per year, which is based on estimated manganese recoveries of 90%. On the mining side of things, the PEA assumes that the mine will be an underground operation that uses underhand cut and fill mining techniques, with the deposit to be accessed via 2 vertical shafts. Those shafts include a 5.5 meter diameter production shaft that can hoist 1,500 tons of ore and 250 tons of waste a day, and a spiral ramp that provides access every 30 meters vertically. Ore production is expected to average 368,000 tons a year, while the nominal mining capacity is pegged at 400,000 tons a year. That ore is expected to average manganese grades of 18.9% over the first 5 years of project life, while grades over the entire life of mine are expected to average out a bit lower at 17.4%. It's a bit of a side note here, but that is why we highlighted the USGS comment on ore production that exceeds 20% manganese content. Anyways, ore is to be transported by both truck and rail to the processing facility, the site for which has not yet officially been selected, with several locations said to be in the running. Candidate sites are being evaluated on chemical input costs, power rates, logistics, permitting, and the proximity to U.S. battery manufacturers, among other qualifiers. Construction is expected to take 2 years to complete, after which a 3-year ramp-up to full production is expected for both the mine and the processing plant expansion. The plant specifically is expected to start out at 100,000 tons per year in capacity, expanding to 200,000 tons per year by year 5. So how does this shake out from a financial point of view? Well, initial capital expenditures are pegged at $475 million to get things up and running, followed by an additional $150 million being required for a processing plant expansion. Both those figures include a 25% capital contingency. Sustaining capital and closing cost requirements, meanwhile, sit at $276 million, while working capital requirements are estimated at about $10 million. On a per-ton basis, operating costs per ton of ore produced are estimated at $400, while costs per ton of battery-grade manganese produced are pegged at $815. All of this shakes out to an after-tax net present value of $1.4 billion, alongside an internal rate of return of 43.5% using a discount rate of 10%. Average annual after-tax cash flows are estimated at $250 million. Payback on the project, meanwhile, is pegged at just 23 months. But there's a bit of a problem with those figures. The base case scenario assumes a long-term price of $2,500 for battery-grade high-purity manganese sulfate monohydrate. And well, let's just say that figure is akin to all of the lithium developers using a price of $24,000 a ton lithium. Battery-grade manganese sulfate right now is trading at about $740 per metric ton, and that's up versus recent weeks. Yes, they use a long-term price, and that's fine, but it's not exactly realistic under the current scenario. However, the one thing we will say here is that this is a critical mineral with no domestic production, which is a heavy focus of the US government right now, and the government has shown with MP Materials they are willing to backstop a premium price for domestically supplied critical minerals in the name of national security. So really, anything is possible in this environment. All right, so let's wrap it up. Where does Electric Metals go from here? Well, they intend to proceed to pre-feasibility and feasibility study activities in 2026. At the same time, they are working on advancing their permitting with state and federal agencies, while at the same time doing the typical community outreach to get locals on their side. They've also indicated that they will be speaking to Tier 1 EV and battery manufacturers to attempt to secure some offtake arrangements to help fund this thing. But in this geopolitical environment, we don't suspect funding will be all that difficult of a hurdle for a critical mineral project with zero domestic sources. All right, everybody, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, do me a favor, smash that like button, subscribe, and ring that notification bell. Folks, if there are stories you want us to cover, as always, let us know in the comments section. And if you want more mining content, maybe check out our website over at thedeepdive.ca. All right, everybody, thanks for watching.